I'm excited to share with you the second part of the Play to Create system, which is trace, cut, and inking. If you have not had a chance to check out the first step of the Play to Create system, which is the designing process, please make sure to check out that video. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. I'll of course share some tips and tricks along the way, and overall we'll just start creating and seeing our actual design come to life. Okay, so for this next step, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be tracing, cutting, and inking, which is what we recommend to do next. Now this is very basic. We use basic tools to accomplish this. One, just because we found for ourselves that by allowing it to be simple, you actually found that, well, what we found was that we were accomplishing a lot more. And so for those of you that might be concerned with cutting or different things like that, let me show you kind of what I have experienced through this process and why we recommend inking and such. So the first step, I'm going to just take my piece of paper that I want this specific element to be cut out, for example, and I'm going to trace it. Now I will note here that if a pattern is maybe a little bit busier, you can absolutely turn maybe the pattern over, especially for example like this one, since you can see if you like flip it, it doesn't make that big of a difference with a leaf because it mirrors each other. So if necessary, you could just, trace it on this side if you needed. If you have a dark pattern, sometimes what I'll do is I'll grab like let me grab one here, a colored pencil or something like that, if that's something that you also want to pay attention to. Okay, so there's a couple insights, but for the most part, I always just trace it like you see here. I keep it pretty basic and simple when it comes to that. Okay, then we're gonna cut it out. All right, and I do recommend a good pair of scissors. And I think the important thing to note is that when we say a good pair of scissors, it's like $15, and that will give you a really good, decent pair of scissors. Maybe not your $3 pair of scissors, the ones that you get your kids back to school. It makes a big of difference when you have a nice pair of scissors. So I did detach it from my paper. I recommend that you always detach whatever piece from your larger piece of paper. Yet it's a very efficient use of your paper. Great way to use scraps of paper too. A lot of times with these different elements that you're layering on your pages. So I'm gonna start my cut. And basically what we recommend is you keep your cutting hands more of like a stationed, and you're actually gonna guide with your alternate hand. Like, so for example, my left hand in this case. So I'm going to guide the paper through my scissors. And so I'm gonna just kind of do some cuts there, and I move that paper. And this will become second nature, but I do like to mention it just so that you can kind of pay attention to how you're cutting and maybe work on some of those, mental notes as you're cutting, and before you know it, it'll just become second nature. And that's it. That's the basics of it. Now, of course, because it's handmade, literally handmade, you might have some imperfections. So you might have one like pencil marks. I am not always on my lines. Actually, majority of the time I am far off my lines, but that's where the inking comes in. So instead of wasting or using my time to maybe erase the pencil marks, again, unless it's like way off, right? I just simply ink the edges. Not only does it hide pencil lines and marks, but it actually blends any of those imperfections and gives it that nice finished look. Actually, whether I hand cut something or like if I bought a sticker and it was perfectly cut or machine cut, I always ink the edges anyways, just because I do feel like it gives a nice finished look to the things that you're working with, and a little bit more quality too. But I also think that when it comes to actually layering the different patterns on top of your layout, it helps them kind of pop off each other and have that contrast. So that's kind of the basics of cutting here on these. Let me show you the finished layout that I ended up with in this design. So you can see that I designed it with my designer templates, and then I just did the same steps that I just showed you. I just took each element, traced and cut those out of my paper. And for me, I decided to, instead of matting each individual, that's why I decided to do like this strip pattern that you see here. And so I took my brown here and added a lighter background. So I did switch it a little bit in the process, but I just wanted to point that out. And what's fun, here's another insight into this, is this right here is the fun border, which again, it wasn't till, you know, the creative process, which you might adjust a little bit from your design, but the goal here is to start playing. So instead of staring at an empty page, you're gonna start playing, even if it just through the process. That's okay, that's creativity at its finest. So let the process kind of work with it. But I did want to note this for whatever it's worth. I was intentionally going to use this as a fun border, but then when I decided on matting, instead of matting my pictures to kind of bring attention to the center here, I decided to go ahead and tuck that like a border, like our borders would actually kind of work in this scenario. So yes, it could have had that fun trail feel, but I decided to tuck it. And so what I did on this one, for whatever it's worth, if you have a chance to check out how we cut out our borders, make sure to check out that video. But since on this layout, I just wanted to point that out. So really what I did is, normally with our fun borders, you would cut, or you would trace and cut. So you would trace this side, the middle, and then of course this side, and then you would cut it 3 times, right? Because I was tucking it inside of this strip, I just kept my straight edge on my paper, lined it up, traced it, and then of course take my other one, and then I just made a mark here. So for me, I just traced and cut it out like we recommend tracing and cutting our borders out, and then you would just simply follow that line. And it's just another fun way to really show you that even with the fun borders, you can take advantage of them and kind of look outside of the box and play to create. And you'll be surprised at all the different designs, and allowing that tangible, you know, tangibleness of creating to work in your favor. You'll be inspired in many different ways.